What's up, everybody? This is Josh Wilson with TINKTINKDOTORG Interviews, here today with Mr. Christian Allen. He used to be a former lead designer for Ghost Recon 2, Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, and Halo Reach. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very good. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm pretty good. All right, so first question would be, how did you get into the gaming industry?
Oh, it's a little bit of a long story, but I was in the Marine Corps, and I got out in '99, and me and my buddies used to LAN party every night, Friday night at my buddy's house, and we were playing a game called Rainbow Six. And a bunch of my friends were complaining about different guns not being into the game and not being able to play as terrorists and only be able to play as Rainbow. And I was a computer dabbler, so I started messing with files and started making mods, and that led to putting mods on the internet. And then people liked them, and that led to me getting a job at Red Storm as an assistant designer on first games were Rainbow Six Athena Sword and Ghost Recon Island Thunder, and then moved on to lead designer and then creative director, and then on to Halo after that.
Very nice. So, how was your time at Red Storm?
Oh, it's exciting. It was great. I mean, there was a lot of challenges. When I started, I originally thought I was going to be working on the Rainbow Six franchise. And like I said, I did a little work on Athena Sword. I did some weapons for that, which was an expansion for Raven Shield. But pretty quickly got swapped with another designer and moved on to this newfangled Xbox thing on Ghost Recon. And so I did missions, a lot of the missions for Island Thunder, and then took over as lead on the Xbox platform. And it was kind of a transition for me because I'd always been a PC gamer before that. The last console I had, before that was a SNES. So to me, this console at the time was, really foreign, and it was something really different. And of course, I made the mistake of my very first Xbox experiences. I loaded up Splinter Cell and tried to play it. I'd never touched a controller before in my life, but on an Xbox. So there was a lot of challenges as a designer, but that was really exciting. Designing new control schemes, and then when the 360 came along, working on that with all the new features with Xbox Live, and then working on PS3, there was a lot of challenges and cool stuff. And Red Storm's a great place. There's a lot of really talented people that have been there for a long time, and you get to do things like go shooting and play paintball and airsoft and cool stuff like that.
So after Red Storm, you went to Bungee to be the lead designer for Halo Reach. Tell me how that was.
Bungie's an awesome place full of really talented people, and I really super respect what they do. And honestly, one of the challenges that I had as a designer was I really underestimated the complexity of Halo. Halo has this kind of reputation of this run and gun game, that's super fast paced, and there's a lot of kids playing it and all that. But under the surface, Halo is incredibly complex. Mechanics-wise and physics-wise. When I first sat down and started messing with the Warthog, when I was working on the Rocket Hog, I remember going in and opening up the data files for the Warthog, and I thought, well, maybe the Warthog needs to just be a tad bit slower. Like, what's going to happen? Let me just slow it down a little bit. So I went into the variables, and I put in a number. And then the Warthog didn't work anymore because the actual variables that drive the Warthog, there's hundreds of them. It's got torque. It's got all the things that the engine works. It's an incredibly complex, incredibly challenging system to work in, which was rewarding as a designer, but also, extremely challenging. It's funny when you think of something like Ghost Recon, you think of it as something much more complicated than something like Halo, but Halo has so many more different systems all working at the same time that the balancing is extremely challenging, which was exciting and difficult as well.
So basically, they hired you and you came and screwed all their stuff up.
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, the games industry is a small place, so, I've still got a lot of friends at Bungee, but I moved on. I had an exciting opportunity at Warner Brothers Games, working on a big IP there here locally in Seattle, and so I took that opportunity.
Speaking of Warner Brothers, it said that you were working as design director for an unannounced project. Now, has that project been announced, or did it get scrapped, or?
It has not been announced yet. I believe it's still in development.
Still in development. All right.
Yeah.
Is there,
There's Warner has several. One of the exciting things about Warner Brothers is they have so many high-profile IPs going at the same time. They've got Mortal Kombat and Batman and Lord of the Rings and all their big movie IPs. It's a big organization, a lot bigger than a lot of developers or gamers even think. Warner Brothers is kind of seen, although they're starting to get, I think they're starting to get some gamer cred especially with Mortal Kombat, which I was super impressed that Warner Brothers Publishing, really allowed, the former Midway Chicago guys and NetherRealms guys to really just do what they wanted to do. And same with Rocksteady on Batman Arkham City. And again with the Turbine guys with Lotro and DDO Online. So I think they're starting to get that gamer cred and really break into the kind of the hardcore sphere, along with some other successes like the Lego games and the Scribblenauts. So there's a lot of big titles going on, so I don't know exactly where the specific title I was working on is going today, but I'm pretty sure some version of it's going to come out at some point.
is there anything, that unannounced project, is there anything at all you could say about it?
Not really. When you work for a big publisher, you signed a lot of NDAs, and there's a lot of lawyers that look at those things. So you pretty much have to keep your mouth shut, and that's one of the things that one of the things, when you work for 2 years under NDA and you can't really say what you're doing and you can't really get out to the fans and kind of connect with them, and you have to be kind of sit on the sidelines and be silent. That's one of the reasons that kind of inspired me to want to go indie and start my own company, is to kind of be free from that PR oversight. You understand why the big publishers do it, right? Because, they have these layout plans and these roll-up plans that, they spend lots and lots of money to develop it, and they can't just have some game developer go out and, say, this is what I'm doing, and I think this is going to be great. But I missed that kind of connection with the fans back when I was a modder, and even on the early days in Ghost Recon when we were a little bit less, unfettered, a little bit more unfettered by kind of the carefully marketed plans that you see from the big publishers today.
Right. As you just mentioned earlier, this month actually, is this March when you created your new company?
No, I actually created it here in November, but I pretty much I've
Right.
been silent kind of since then. I mean, all I pretty much had up online was a splash screen. But just this weekend, actually, I announced a Kickstarter project where I'm looking to launch a hardcore tactical shooter. And you'll see hopefully a bunch of press over that in the next couple days. Really trying to take the indie scene and kind of revive a dead genre. Or what's considered a dead genre. But so I've been kind of working behind the scenes. Setting up a business takes time. I also happen to be raising a young child. I have a 5-month-old now, so that took away a chunk of time. But it was great that I could spend time with my newborn son. But it takes time to get these things up and rolling, sign contracts with people, and do all that stuff. And you got to kind of get those things out of the way before you start screaming what you're going to be doing.
Right. And the Kickstarter, what you're doing with that, let's just say hypothetically that not enough money would be raised. Would you still plan on going on with the project?
Well, that's going to be seen as, how much of that is not going to be raised. So if it doesn't make its goal, I mean, I just launched it, and it's on track right now. If I get the same amount of contributions that I've gotten over the past few days, for my calculations, I am on track to make it. But if it doesn't, it's really a measure of scale. I mean, I've always looked at this as, then the exciting thing about Kickstarter is that, to me, it's an experiment in what hardcore fans want and what they say they want and what they actually want and are able to step up and do. Tim Schafer has proven with the Double Fine Adventure project that obviously adventure fans and fans of Tim Schafer are willing to step up and really, do what they want or put their money where their mouth is. And some of the smaller projects like the FTL project and the I forget the name of the game, but the Space Command game, some of those smaller kind of old school projects have been stepped up. But this is really an experiment. There's a few different genres. Hardcore tactical shooters. I would say more hardcore real-time strategy games, flight sims, those kinds of games that used to be really popular, but they've gotten a reputation among game developers and especially game publishers as kind of a niche, really loud, grognard, vocal community that don't really, they don't buy a lot of games. They only buy one game, so why, a year. So why should we cater to these guys when we can go after the, mainstream audience, which, from a business standpoint, that makes complete sense. If I was writing someone a check for millions of dollars, I'm not going to go say, here's millions of dollars. Can you go after this loud, small community of people that are really into what they're doing? But it's not going to appeal to the, the broad mainstream, say shooter fans or action adventure fans. No, you're going to, make Uncharted. You're going to make Assassin's Creed. You're going to go after that mainstream audience. But this, to me, is really an experiment to see how much there is. Because even if it's not completely successful, and we get a lot of, contributions, that's something that I can take to investors and I can take to the publishers and say, look, there is interest in this genre. There is interest in these kinds of games. And I think it's a different approach than a lot of publishers have been taking with, they're kind of dabbling in the free-to-play model, right? Like you've seen, Age of Empires or Ghost Recon Online or MechWarrior, where it's like, well, we're not quite ready to commit all the way, so we'll launch our free-to-play model, and then hopefully the revenue from free-to-play we'll be able to see, right? We'll be able to launch kind of a smaller project, and if it takes off, then great, we'll make all this money from life after sale microtransactions. But I've seen and that's actually, I investigated that as well, but I've seen a huge fan backlash against some of those projects, because of the way they're built with free-to-play. It's all about monetizing the minute-to-minute play, and that kind of takes away, especially in these more kind of hardcore genres like RTSs or flight sims or tac shooters. They're a lot about knowledge of the game and skill and tactics and thinking and planning that don't really sometimes match up with the free-to-play model, which is more about time versus money. Do I want to spend a lot of time doing this, or do I want to spend some money to do it? To me, it's an interesting experiment. We'll see. If it goes well, then we're definitely doing it. If it doesn't go quite as well, then if I can show that there's the community support and that people really are interested, and maybe I just am a bad marketer when it comes to Kickstarter because I'm a game designer, then we'll see how it goes from there.
So, are you your new game? Does it have a name yet?
It does not. It does not. Basically, what I called it on Kickstarter was crowdsourced hardcore tactical shooter.
Right. I wasn't sure if that was a name or what, but
no, that's just the name of the project. Names are. It was funny because my company, Cerealin LLC, Cerealin has been my handle for forever since I started on the internet. And it's a made-up word based on an RPG character. And I was trying to come up with the name of the company, and I was sitting and I had it was me and a producer that's joined me in the project, and we had 30 or 40 names, and we're going through, and you'd be amazed that I had headshot games and stuff like that, and you just go through and you Google it, and it's okay, that's off the list, that's off the list, that's off the list. So things like names of games and names of companies, the reason I chose Cerealin is because it was unique and nobody else had used it for anything else. And so the name of a game actually takes quite a bit of research. There's a reason. That's another thing at the games companies. Names of games sometimes change all the time. On GRA, it was originally Ghost Recon 3. And it changed at the last, well, not the last minute, but after it was announced, it changed. There's various reasons. There's legal reasons. There's marketing reasons. But actually, naming a game can be a challenge, especially in litigious America. You might come up with some name of a game I'm just looking at my car, Headlight. It's this awesome game called Headlight, and then you find out that some guy has trademarked Headlight, and he's now suing the bejesus out of you. So.
The whole Elder Scrolls, Minecraft type of thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's all that. Or, you pick a name that you think is totally unique, and it turns out that it's maybe, you are ripping someone off, or maybe it just sounds like you're ripping someone off. And then, so it takes a lot of research. And things like names, to me, I'm a game designer, so I'm about the gameplay. I don't fancy myself a movie director or some, wonderful storyteller. I'm about gameplay and how gameplay works. And so things like names to me are less important than what the core of the game and the vision of the game is going to be.
Right. Now, your company's Cerealin LLC. Let's look into the future here after your new tactical hardcore first-person shooters came out and it's widely successful and whatnot. Would the company, would it just focus on more of a tactical hardcore shooter type of things, or would y'all branch out into other types of genres and whatnot?
I think there's room to branch out. I think there's a lot of room within that kind of genre, that kind of tactical genre. I wouldn't be opposed to doing a hardcore tactical zombie shooter, right? Like, there's been no zombie shooters that are realistic ballistics and all that kind of stuff, and using zombies as levels instead of just as fodder. I think there's a lot of room in that genre, and once you build the successful systems for a certain game, I think you can go a long way and try different genres within that thing. I think there's kind of this misperception that the experience in the genre itself makes the game good, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I come back to Halo. One of the first things I did when I got to Bungee to really learn the systems is I sat down, and being a former modder, I just kind of opened up the tools and started messing with them, and essentially kind of basically made a tactical shooter just by adjusting weapon values, character movement, jump heights, movement speed, getting rid of shield regen. Those kinds of things are relatively easy. I mean, people tend to forget that the original Rainbow Six prototype that Red Storm made was actually a Quake 2. They went in with a Quake 2 mod and just changed some of the values, and then sat around the office and played it with one-shot kills and slower movement, and said, holy shit, this is fucking awesome. And then they took their own engine and built the game. So I think there's a lot of room, and once you get a solid engine and a solid team, and a team that's shipped together and worked together, of exploring different genres within that. Now, what you're not going to see is our team shipping this kind of title and then turning around and going, okay, now we're going to make a an RTS, or now we're going to make an open world GTA Mafia game or something, or we're going to make Facebook games or something like that. I'm pretty limited in scope in what I want to do. Maybe looking into the different platforms for the genre. I think there's opportunity and room for for mobile, for the different platforms. In the next couple of years, as various different platforms emerge. I think we've seen some properties. And obviously, this is a very simplistic example, but Angry Birds. But actually, a better example, I think, is Minecraft. I mean, if you showed me Minecraft, a few years ago, and said that this was going to go cross-platform, I would have been like, well, that can't go cross-platform. That's like super hardcore and super low res. Like, that could never be hard. That's just a hardcore PC gamer. Nobody's going to play that except for a hardcore PC gamer. But now we're seeing it's starting to branch out into other platforms, and I think there's room for that in lots of different genres.
Okay, so your new game that has no name as of yet. Three quick questions about it. First would be, is it going to be making some kind of unveil or anything at the Game Developers Console, or not console, the Game Developers Conference? Is it going to be PC or console, or is it just going to be PC and console later? And is this game, could it be accessible to the casual gamer?
So, yeah, I'll take them in order. So, GDC, no. We will not have a reveal this year. We're just starting the foundations of the game because I just started the company late last year. We've got some people working on it, and we're building kind of we're building two different things. One, the platform for the engine. We will be using licensed technology. So we're looking at a few different engine license engine technologies, and which one's most appropriate, both from a technical standpoint, a game iteration standpoint, and accessibility standpoint for community members that want to contribute content. So we want an engine that someone can, go and get easily. So we're not going to be using something that's that we're not going to be able to say, yeah, go download it from that website and learn the engine and then come and make content for us. So we don't have anything that we're going to be releasing here in a few days at GDC. What was the second question? What were the other two questions?
The new shooter, is it going to be PC only, and if it is at the moment, could you see it coming to consoles?
Platform. So yeah, so we're leading on PC. Platform. PC is going to be the lead development platform, and there's a few different reasons for that. I've seen it be. And I'm sure some engineers are going to completely disagree with me, because engineers tend to want to to develop on the most restrictive platform first from a coding standpoint, and that tends to be the PlayStation, and then move backwards to the Xbox or PC. But from a design standpoint, since I'm a game designer, I've seen more success going the other way. When I look back at Ghost Recon, the original one that started on PC and then went to console, Ghost Recon Island Thunder, which was then changed to Ghost Recon Jungle Storm on the PlayStation 2. Those have been more successful, in my opinion, from a design standpoint, because the PC interface itself is more complex. There's more opportunities for input on a mouse keyboard than there is on a gamepad. And so when you design your systems to be streamlined on a gamepad, and especially when you design your menus to be streamlined on a gamepad, it's kind of difficult. In fact, you have to completely kind of start from scratch to take that out to a more open interface like the PC. And so from a game designer standpoint, I think it's better to start on something like the PC, especially something that we're talking about that's kind of, with a hardcore tactical shooter based in PC. I mean, there have been more hardcore console games, but PC is kind of where it started. So the other reason why is because of the uncertainty of the consoles as we're moving forward over the next couple of years. I'm not privy to any information that anybody else is privy to. But the rumors that I hear on the internets and the street is that there's new consoles coming down the line, and so I feel PC is not going to change over the next couple of years. Delivery systems might change. Platforms might change, whether it be download and install or Flash or Chrome, or those things are continuing to get stronger and stronger and stronger. But if we start on PC and then all of a sudden because I'm just a little guy now, I'm an indie guy, Xbox isn't going to call me and tell me when their new console's online. Sony's not going to call me. So by developing on PC first, then if those console changes come online, we can adapt to those. And Torchlight's really what kind of inspired me from this development standpoint. They made what would be considered a relatively hardcore PC title with Torchlight. The point and click dungeon crawler, and it was so successful on PC. Now they're bringing it to console, and console gamers have heard the buzz about it and they want it. And so that's the approach I'm taking, but definitely not shutting out console. Since I've launched the Kickstarter page, I was surprised by the amount of PlayStation fans who contacted me. I've never really, there's SOCOM, right? But you don't think of PlayStation, at least I never really thought of PlayStation as, a huge home for hardcore, and hard
surprised.
Yeah, I mean, hardcore is it's a loaded term, right? Like developer, people use hardcore as a different term, so I probably shouldn't even use it, because publishers think of hardcore in the terms of amount of hours played per week. And the difference term between, although you could have the casual gamer that's on Cityville for 90 hours a week. So are they a hardcore gamer? I don't know. But anyway, the people that are into the more, I'll just say the more challenging, the more unforgiving experiences. When I look at, previously when I looked at PlayStation, I thought of Uncharted, I thought of God of War, I thought of those more cinematic experiences, a lot of cutscenes, a lot of QuickTime events, but I've just gotten an outpouring of PS3 gamers that are just like, please, please, please make this, this complex tactical shooter for the PS3, so we can just, shoot mofos in the head and, and not deal with a lot of, run and gun stuff. So it's exciting, and that's cool. That's one of the cool things about doing this kind of thing, and not, being locked behind the doors, of being able to actually respond and say like, wow, PS3 maybe is, in the cards, so we should go out and get someone with PS3 experience and start thinking for about a PS3, version earlier rather than later. But that was a really long-winded answer, so sorry.
It's all right. But that other question, though, is this is going to be a hardcore tactical shooter. But is it going to be such a steep learning curve or catered to the hardcore in such a way that a casual gamer, there'd just be no hope for them?
No, I think the answer to that is co-op. I've never worked on a game that didn't have co-op. I think co-op is a good building block for designing any game. If your game works well in co-op, it's going to work well in single player, assuming you have strong AI, and it should also work well in multiplayer as well. Like I said, all the games I worked on is co-op, and co-op is the great equalizer. I always have this story. That was one of the interesting things about Rainbow Six, the original one, that really piqued my interest. Is I'd played some Doom. I think it was Doom 2 had co-op back in the day. But when we were LAN gaming, we were primarily playing, as for shooters, we were playing Quake 2 and then some Q3 Test. And there's this dude I played with, Ryan. He was the awesome, he could have been professional if he wasn't in Alaska. He was the guy that was playing with the screen resolution way down and all the colors, changed so that he could, totally, and he would just pwn everybody constantly. You're playing Quake with this guy, and he would just own you. And by the end of the night, you didn't want to play with him anymore. You just wanted to throw beer cans at him because he just sniped you with the Gauss gun over and over and over and over and over again. Well, we had never really played co-op together, and my buddy brought Rainbow Six home, and then we got a few copies of it, and we started playing, and all of a sudden, the 4 or 5, 6 of us were all playing together. And we were all, even though,
It was that holy crap moment.
Yeah, it was that holy crap moment. We got Ryan, who's the super, Twitch player. We got me, who knows a lot about guns and tactics. We had Scott, who was drunk constantly, but he was really good at throwing grenades at people. We had Elliot, who was just yelling at everybody and shooting up into the air and getting us killed. But, it suddenly turned from this not so nice experience where, you start out the night having fun, and by the end of the night, you're tired and you're just getting your ass kicked over and over again, to just a fun experience all through the night, and how well can we do together. And I think if you build your co-op systems well enough to be able to support other players and help them, I think that's how you take a complicated game. You look at any complicated game with a high barrier of entry. Think of Empire Earth. Actually, the best example is Homeworld for the old school gamers. Homeworld was a game that was just, light years ahead of, literally light years ahead of anything that I'm talking about here. But you could play it co-op, so you could join together, and players would help you. And I think that's the answer, is to create systems that help players help each other and introduce them to that experience. Because there's this perception, which is interesting, that games that are more brutal, which, again, I've been inspired by games like Demon's Souls, which are incredibly brutal and incredibly difficult and incredibly popular. But because they're punishing in a slow sense, an old school Rainbow Six where, you move around slowly for a long time and then you get killed. Well, I experienced, in designing Ghost Recon 2, we tried to make a more linear approach because we had this assumption that console gamers wanted this more linear approach, which you've seen kind of, if you played Summit Strike, it was kind of, we went back to the old model. But what I found was linearity plus difficulty equals frustration, and linearity plus non-linearity plus difficulty equals challenge. Because if you have to go down the same route every single time and you die over and over and over again, then it's the game's fault. But if you have multiple routes and you can choose your direction and you can try different ways each time, when you succeed, it's your success. And so I think that's the approach to look at. You give the player the opportunity to experiment. You give the player the opportunity, the tools to try different things, try different tactics. And yes, some people are just going to be, I'm used to games where I can get shot 50 times and it's going to be fine, and I can hide behind a rock and my health's going to come back, and that's fine. That
happens in real life, right?
Yeah, exactly. You take a bullet and you go like, oh, I'm shot. I just need to stop and wait here behind this rock.
Let me walk it off.
Yeah, I'll just walk it off. But there's going to be a segment of the population that aren't going to like those kinds of games, but there's going to be a segment of the population that don't like any games. There's certain games that are very good games that just I don't like. I respect them, but it's just not my cup of tea. Fighting games, I just do not. I think Mortal Kombat looks great. I think Street Fighter looks great, but I just do not have the time, patience. I'm ADD. I don't have the memory to memorize all these combos and do it. And I always got my ass kicked at the arcade, and I've never not gotten my ass kicked at a good fighting game. And so I just gave up. I'm like, I'm done with fighting games. It doesn't mean they're bad games, but they're never going to appeal to me. Making them more mainstream, like making it so that I can beat a good Mortal Kombat player isn't making Mortal Kombat better, and it's not going to sell me another copy of the game. Still not going to buy it because it's just not my thing. And so I think, again, you look at co-op, you look at systems that help people helping each other, and you approach it from that direction rather than trying to again, chase the leaders, do what everybody else does. Make it super easy, make it so you can't die. Of course, you can always put in those systems, in single player, because I don't believe in hampering a single player experience. I think if someone wants to put their game into super duper easy mode and just kind of roll through it just to experience it, I don't have a problem with that. Maybe they won't get the achievements, and that maybe they won't get some benefit in multiplayer that you might get if you're gonna roll into multiplayer, but you have to be able to you have to be able to not detract from the skillful players, and that can be done through matchmaking and other elements. But that's the approach that I want to take.
Very nice. This probably should have been the first question I asked, but for a lot of games you were a lead level designer, or not level, excuse me, you were just a lead designer. What did you actually do?
What did I actually do? So a lead designer on every project and or creative director, depending on where you're at and what that means, it really depends on what game you're working on, what company you're working at, and what tool set you're working in. So on Ghost, I came up, and it depends on your background. Like my background is in scripting and weapon design. So some lead designers are more writers. I know some lead designers that are basically they write the backstory of the game. They write all the characters' bios. They write all the dialogue. Some of them are managers. They manage people. Myself, I'm a mission scripter and a weapon designer. So as lead designer, I say on Ghost Recon 2, I managed some designers. I think we had 6 or 8. But a lot of what I did was mission scripting. So when I transitioned from like Island Thunder to Ghost Recon 2, I came off of a lot of the single player missions, and in fact I had another designer, Jeff McGann, who kind of took over more of the single player scripting, and I did a lot of the, along with Gary Stelmack, did a lot of the multiplayer scripting, both for Ghost Recon 2 and Ghost Recon 2 Summit Strike. And then I did a lot of the systems design, and a lot of the stuff that you do as a designer, players don't care about, or it would sound, boring, like the enemy call-out system of how and when an enemy calls out dialogue, or how and when your teammates call out, or how the teammates respond to various different order inputs, or the control scheme. Control scheme is a huge thing as a designer, especially on the console. On the PC, it's more standardized now on console than it was back in 2004 when it was kind of the Wild West, and we're all trying to do our own thing and find the best way. Pretty much now, Halo's pretty much standardized things. But so you, as a lead designer, you lead people, so you're in charge of people, and you're assigning people to different areas of the game. You tend to be designing specific features or weapons or things that you think are critical. But there's also, there's the day-to-day things that need to get done that you just do as a designer. At Bungee, when Mike Tipple was working on the kind of nighttime recon mission, he was having trouble. I don't know if you've played Reach, but there's this mission where you go into this rebel stronghold, and June is covering you, and he's sniping dudes.
I'm slightly non-angry Halo fanboy, but
okay, yeah.
So we're good.
Yeah. So there's this mission where June is covering you, and with the with the default settings on the sniper rifle, June was just kind of slaughtering everybody, and so you spend a day sitting down and tweaking the weapon AI files for June so that he's helping you and hopefully shooting and looking cool, but not but not just poning everybody while you hide in a corner. Things like that. Working on the spread of the rocket hog. Working on the Covenant focus rifle. But there's, and depending on I did a lot more writing at Red Storm on the earlier Ghost Recon titles, like 2 and Summit Strike, than I did at Bungee. At Bungee, I worked, we had a cinematic director and a writer, and so, we're kind of, the design team was working on the high-level kind of campaign structure of, the different missions, and then, the writer and the cinematics director was working more on the specifics of, the Spartans' background and who they were and the Magnificent Seven approach. Whereas like on Ghost Recon 2, like I wrote all the bios for the various different ghosts and stuff like that. So it depends on the team. It depends on the technology. Generally, as a lead designer, your responsibility is, the core design of the game, designing the core systems, and then the end user experience. The engineers are responsible for making sure the game works and doesn't crash and isn't full of bugs. The artists are making sure that the game looks good and runs within specs that the engineers set. The producers are making sure that it finishes on time and on budget. And as designers, everything else is, QA is testing everything. And then designers, you're kind of the catch-all of everything else. You design the systems, you write the dialogue, you make sure the end user experience is what it's supposed to be for the vision of the game, depending on who sets that vision of the game, whether it's the fans or publishing or business or whatever. So it changes from day to day, and that's what's exciting about being a game designer is literally every day is different. You might be writing a document one day and tweaking AI the next day, and directing voice actors the day after and doing a press interview the day after that. So it's pretty cool.
Very nice. All right, so apparently you have a fan. I have a few questions from some other people, if you don't mind.
Sure.
These come from Mr. Chase Guidry. He's actually part of the TINKTINKDOTORG also. He's, extremely into Ghost Recon, Rainbow Six, all that. So, his first question would be, in Ghost Recon 2, the cover system, it was where you could, go in a cover, but your line of sight, if you could only see what you should have been able to see. You can't, have a God camera and, see everything like in Gears of War and whatnot. He's wanting to know, why was that changed from Ghost Recon 2 to, Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, to where you could just see everything and be in cover?
There was a few reasons. For one thing, I've been working on third person is actually a challenge, and I totally respect the guys that started in a third person environment like the SOCOM guys. We had a lot of problems with parallax. We're mandated to change from first person to third person. In response, one of the real reasons was to differentiate Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon, because Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon, they're very similar franchises. It was basically, when Ghost Recon first came out, it was, Rainbow Six outside. And so there's this feeling that, there's, and it's true. I mean, there actually was a problem with the fan base from each game cannibalizing each other. If you looked at the Xbox Live charts, Halo this is back in the Xbox days, Halo would be sitting on number 1. Ghost Recon would come out, we'd be number 2. Then Rainbow Six would come out, it'd go to number 3. Ghost Recon would drop to number 5, and then, kind of back and forth. And so there's this idea that we needed to differentiate and go third person. Also, there was a drive to want to be able to see the characters. And it led to some, actually, the third-person camera, while it led to a lot of problems, it led to some cool features that wouldn't have made it into the game, like some of the lean features and some of the actual AI aiming systems that we designed for Ghost Recon 2 that actually made cover matter, because actually in Ghost Recon 1, as the classic line went, he headshotted me at 200 yards, while whipping his AK around. That's because the AI actually didn't really take cover into account. Whereas when we had third person, because you could see the cover you were behind, the AI actually did take it into account through a raycast and dice roll aiming system, and so that's why you could stand with just your arm sticking out behind a tree, and most of those rounds would hit the tree. But anyway, I digress. As far as why it changed, I would have to say the true reason why, and I can say this now that it's been a few years after the fact, and I'm sure they're using a completely different system in Future Soldier, is the primary camera for GRAW was developed for single player, whereas most of the camera development, aside from the parallax problems, and parallax is when because your camera is above your head, but your bullets come out of your gun. And or your face, depending on the game, you have problems where it looks like you're aiming over the wall, but your gun is shooting the wall. That can lead to a lot of problems, especially when you're launching grenades out of your weapon, and you think you're shooting over the wall, and you tend to blow yourself up. If you ever had a chance to watch any of the early demos of Ghost Recon 2, a lot of them involved me trying to shoot over a wall and me blowing myself up on some kind of press demo, because it looked like I should be able to shoot over the wall, but it wasn't. And some of the engineers came up with some really elegant solutions for that parallax problem. But I'd say one of the core issues is that the camera system and the camera placement was developed with a focus on single-player experience, and that's the thought at the time was, again, with taking a project, and again, they were successful. I mean, GRAW way outsold any of the previous Ghost Recons, so from a business standpoint, you can't knock it too much, although from a fan standpoint, I'm sure plenty of people will knock it. It was felt that a camera that would help the player engage the enemy and make them feel more powerful was better than a camera that limited them. Now, I worked on designs even after GRAW 2 when I was working on future games that tried to rein that in, to as the technology advanced and the experience in the engine advanced, to try to figure out systems that are third person and cover based, that tried to compensate for those advantages that a third person gives. And I think there are ways to do that, but they take a lot of time, a lot of engineers, and a lot of designers to really work those systems out. And so applying those to a multiplayer environment is where people get frustrated, right? Because it's like when the guy shoots you around the corner. We tried to compensate by adding host-based controls to turn the various options off. Same with things like the drone. The drone's awesome in single player, not so much in multiplayer when some dude's using a drone, even though you could shoot it down. So our effort and our kind of way to try to compromise with that was to provide the players the options to turn those things off. Some people used them, some people didn't. But that's one of the nice things about this project I'm looking at is, I plan on going first person. I think, and maybe I'll consider for PlayStation 3. I think, actually every single message that I've gotten from the PS3 community so far has been third person. But for the PC title, at least, first person is going to be the way to go, because the tactical advantage of a third person camera, you have to spend so much time trying to overcome it that it's just, you spend a lot of cycles and money and time trying to compensate for the fact that you have a third person camera.
All right. His next question is, when you were working on Halo Reach, at what point in the development time did you leave, and did you have any input on the bloom and the backpacks that were in the game?
The bloom and the backpacks, yes, yes, I did actually have input. That was a long process when it comes to the backpacks. I could talk about those. I left during what we would call production. So I started at Bungee the day that Halo 3 went gold, and 5 of us. It was Marcus Leto, the creative director. Chris Carney, the lead level designer, Joe Tung, the producer, Lee, the cinematics director, and myself as lead designer, essentially went into a room and started figuring out what Reach was going to be. At the time I started, as I remember it, if I remember correctly, it was basically just like it's going to be Halo without Master Chief. Um, at the time, ODST hadn't really kind of came about as a thing. There was still kind of Chronicles was going on, and so that kind of affected things. But that's when, over the next few months is when we developed the idea, and a lot of this had been percolating. I'm not trying to take credit for any of this because this was a team effort. The idea of a prequel and Reach, Reach being, this exciting thing of how it's going to end, but what happened to these people. This idea of the previous Halos had been very epic Star Wars all over the universe, whereas Reach was more of the Saving Private Ryan, the guy, the boots on the ground. And so then we went through pre-production. Pre-production was a lot of prototyping, building different game elements, trying out different things. And then, towards the end of pre-production, wrapping up things, cutting, when you do, especially in an engine like Halo, you because you can sit down and create, and this is what excited me as a designer about working in Bungie's tech is, you can sit down and make a gun in, an hour. You could say, like, I want a gun that shoots plasma stickies that when they explode, 10 Marines fly out of them and start shooting everybody. Now, the network engineer is going to strangle you when you do that.
But you can still do it.
But you can still do it. Or I want to make a flying warthog, so I'm just going to, paint the warthog purple and make it fly. Or let's bring back the Shadow and call it the Revenant. The one cool thing I do love is that even though I left during production, almost all the at least the vehicles that I named, like the Saber and the Revenant, and the Rocket Hog, maintained their names. So at least I did a good job there. But so we finished up pre-production. We're cutting, you're kind of in the phase where you're cutting all this extra fat and figuring out, really tightening things up and nailing things down. We're in production for a few months, and we were actually into production when I left Bungee, so things were getting made. A few things got cut after I left, but the kind of the bulk of the stuff that I worked on, along with all the other talented people at Bungee, and again, giving them full credit, not myself, is when I stepped away.
Are you broadcasting what I just said?
All right. All right. Next question. When you were at WB Games, did you have any?
Oh, yeah, we forgot about the jetpacks.
Oh yeah. Let's go with that.
Yeah. So I was there. One of the other designers really championed the idea of the accessories. It was really an idea of how do we replace equipment. Equipment. Had its challenges in Halo 3, and so that system was a way to try to kind of replace what we called the fourth leg of the golden tripod, being melee assault rifle and grenades.
Okay. Very nice. Okay, so when you were with WB Games, did you work on Gotham City Impostors any?
Only to play test it. Craig Hubbard, who is the designer on Fear, the original Fear, and his team, along with David Longo, who's the art director, they came up with the whole. And this is one cool thing that I respect WB Games about. That team that had worked on Fear and a few other games, Condemned and Blood, kind of the old school Monolith core team, basically essentially came up with Gotham City Impostors themselves. And it cracked me up, and not being at WB anymore, I'm not a spokesman for them, but it cracked me up when the initial response to Impostors was, some marketing guy thought that, we'll just slap Batman on a shooter and call it a day. But it was originally a piece of artwork that team came up with, which was all these people and it was a clip of it was a video clip of that scene from Dark Knight where the people were pretending, and then it was a bunch of silly artwork of these guys dressed up in these crazy Batman costumes, and they posted that up, and everybody in the studio was like, that game needs to get made, like that game has to get made, it's so awesome. So like I said, I play tested it, I provided feedback. I enjoyed it, got my ass kicked handily in it, but I wasn't part of the development team.
All right. This next question would be, what kind of cover system is going to be in your new hardcore tactical shooter?
My plan is not to have a sticky cover system. My plan is more the old school first-person shooter with lean, crouch, possibly prone, depending on the density of the terrain. If we're doing a lot of really close quarter indoor battles, prone starts to become really problematic. But basically more of a lean system versus a cover system. Will
there be a lean in the cover system?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah. You got to be able to lean around stuff. You got to be able to slice the pie. You got to be able to lean high, lean low. That's just fundamentals of, clearing a building. You got to be able to get up against the wall. The key is, though, finding a way, and it's a challenge in games, right? Because, you can do things in real life that you can't do in games. Possibly, a first-person blind fire. I have no idea how that would work, or, a first-person quick peek. Those are the kinds I'm going to look at rather than pulling the camera out to a third-person perspective, because I think that it's just so fraught with problems. I think a lot of people have tried to nail it well, and I in a tactical situation, I look forward to someone who just completely magically solves the problem, and if they do, I'll definitely look at what they do and think about it.
All right. Next question would be, Chase Gidger, he comes from a very Rainbow Six type of background, and he would like to know, is there going to be customization in your new game? And if so, like the colors and whatnot, is it going to be like traditional green versus blue, or is there going to be people running around with bright neon orange and whatnot?
No, I found that you provide. I feel that you should provide. Let me back up a little bit. It's gonna depend on the region. So. For Americas and Europe, definitely it's gonna go on realistic colors. When I made my first mod for Rainbow Six, or it was actually Rogue Spear, it was called Terrorist Skins, and it was one team got to be the bad guys and one team got to be the good guys, much like Counter-Strike, which never shipped with the original game, and. There was this one set of bad guys they were like these mercenary-looking dudes. They're all in gray, and they had the, tack vests, and they had headsets, and they looked basically looked like Blackwater dudes. And so it was kind of like the Blackwater versus SWAT kind of thing. And that was always my favorite. The crazy stuff, we'll leave that to the modders. If they want to, I learned my lesson, on Ghost Recon 2, as one of the free DLCs, which DLC at the time on the console was a new thing. And for holidays, we released this DLC pack with all these funny packs in them. So it was like an Easter Bunny suit and Present Man and a guy riding a turkey and a dude and we thought it would be funny. We thought it was like, oh, there's this joke pack and people will really think it's funny and it's just for the holidays and it's cute. People got so pissed at us and sent us so many nasty emails about that I realized that, like, in a closed environment, modders can do that kind of stuff. Modders, one of the last mods I made before I went to Red Storm was Commando Monkeys versus Ninjas, and it was like literally like, Planet of the Apes versus these ninjas, and they're throwing banana bombs and stuff. And people like that stuff every once in a while. Like, I want to load up the mod where I can blow people up with bananas. But when they see it in the core game, then they get pissed about it. It's like you've now, defiled everything that they feel is sacred. And so we're going to be keeping with realistic things. There's game design elements to keep in mind. There's, when you look at balancing, you don't want to, hosts have a tendency of while they may tend to be fair, hosts have a tendency of, we're going to be playing on the jungle map and my team's going to be in, SEAL Team Vietnam camo, and your team's going to be in winter camo. So have a nice day. You have to put in safeguards about that kind of stuff, so you can put in pairs, where things that you're in the dark green camo and you're in the dark brown camo, those kinds of things. But when it comes to the silliness, and the reason I talked about regional play is because it really region does affect it. And the reason I know this is because I imported a bunch of copies of Rainbow Six Takedown, which was a special South Korean version of Rainbow Six that was made and distributed only in South Korea. And what they did is, because of their style of play, they're the Quake players and the StarCraft players, they sped everything up. So all the weapons, the reticles come in faster, the players move in faster, and they have a set of skins that they use for tournament play where it's interesting from a Rainbow Six perspective because the team is still in their full tack gear, but one team is wearing blue vests and the other team is wearing yellow vests. And they're equivalent to both teams, and if the players agree, you can have voting systems or whatever. Friendly fire can be frustrating. So in real life today, people wear IR blinkers that you can only see through your goggles. I don't think things like friendly fire indicators, not friendly fire indicators, but friendly indicators, i.e. some kind of blinking something on your teammates that tell you that your teammates versus the enemies, I don't think that takes away from balance or competitiveness or anything like that.
Right. Now, you mentioned about modders and whatnot. The game, when it gets released, do you plan on it being fully moddable?
That is the goal, yes. And that's part of the technology evaluation that we're doing, is to ensure that the engine that we choose allows modders to be able to get in there and do it. I think it was funny because I've spent years at the publishers ranting about mod tools and trying to get mod tools going, and of course on the console it's very difficult, and you've seen games like the original Far Cry that tried to do it and it didn't quite work, it worked but it wasn't super popular. And I always kind of got like, well, yeah, mods are great, but they don't increase our revenue. So, why should we spend the money to do it? And being just Christian Allen, the designer who used to be a fanboy modder, yelling, going like, let's do mod tools, doesn't have a lot of weight to it. But I think recently you look at games like Fallout and Skyrim, and, it's like all of a sudden people have like, I was modding again. This was 13 years ago I started modding and got into the games industry for it. Now it's like all of a sudden people have discovered mods again when I say people, I mean the game developers and game publishers, like, wow, mod tools are really cool. Like, we should empower user-generated content. Like, this is awesome.
I don't see how they couldn't have seen that. like, Jesus, look at Counter-Strike. That was a mod that became more popular than Half-Life.
No, it's true, but they were seen as flukes. Counter-Strike specifically was seen as a fluke. Like, yeah, that happened, but and I think Valve is gonna because obviously Valve learned that lesson. They're Valve, and they support modding all over the place, and a lot of companies do. I'm not trying to paint a brush like every game developer is like that. And obviously, even if you look at Bungee, you look at their their tools even on the console to be able to change the game experience, and they make really cool videos. Their video stuff on the Xbox 360 for Halo 3 and ODST and Reach are just amazing, and the videos that people have made are just awesome. But I felt like there's been kind of a slow sea change. The term used to be in the games industry user-generated content, and the problem was I think a few years ago, publishers saw mods, and then they said, oh, mods are cool. People are making mods. That's neat. How do we monetize that? And so they saw, like, Civ mods, like all the Civ mods, and they said, oh, all these Civ mods, but Civ supported all these mods, and all these people made it, but Civ's not making any money because of the mods, because we can't find a direct correlation between the amount of mods that are made and the amount of people that bought the game, and they've already sold the game, and people are modding, so the people aren't buying the games because of the mods. So how do we monetize that? So let's try to monetize it. Oh, we tried a few ways. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, maybe user-generated content's dead. oh wait, now there's a bunch of PR about it, a bunch of press about it with the Skyrim and Fallout and all that stuff. Like maybe now it's viable again, and that's kind of how the big game industry works. I mean, you kind of go in these cycles where things are one person steps out and people, the game industry in general, and again, I'm not singling out any single publisher or single developer, they'll kind of look at a Valve and say, well, they're Valve. They're just Valve. They're or Blizzard. They're successful at whatever they do because they're Valve and Blizzard, and they're just going to continue to be successful forever. And so if they do something, doesn't necessarily mean we'll be able to do it. But I think that sea change is changing, and I'm a modder, and if when I interview with people and I talk to game companies, I always say that one of my proudest things as a game developer is the first two designers I hired. One is a design director at Irrational, and one's a design director at Junction Point, working on BioShock Infinity, and the other one worked on Epic Mickey. And so as a designer, that's something that I'm super proud about. And if I could give an opportunity to a modder to go down the road that I went down, where I made a bunch of content and someone recognized that content, and then I got a job, and then I got the opportunity to make super cool games, I mean, that's a super rare opportunity. And I would love, that would be, screw the game. I mean, a few people get to have that opportunity and become the next, whatever, Warren Spector, Tim Schafer, Will Wright. Yeah, no. If I had that opportunity, that's super exciting to me, and so that's definitely fundamental to my plans.
So do you think if game development companies and whatnot weren't so much of a greedy bastard that we'd have a lot better games out?
That's an easy out, I think. There's not just greedy bastard, right? They're
companies, but
they're companies, right? But like when we look at user-generated content on the console's a closed system, right? So if you release tools for people to make something, and then someone makes something that's a trademark violation or super hyper offensive, Bungee has an army of mods that filter content. It costs a lot of money for them to support, just people making pictures out of weapons, right? Because they have to have all the systems built in for all the 12-year-olds that make pictures of all the things that we know I'm sure they're making with Forge. It takes a lot of investment to manage that content and to build systems to make sure that, I spent a lot of my time, trying to design systems to filter out people that, scream racial epithets or build, porn out of warthogs or, they spend a lot of money and a lot of time, and they have that opportunity because their game's so successful. But if you're looking at a game that's, you're not making Halo, let's say you're making, a game that's gonna sell, you think it's gonna sell 800,000 or 1.2 million units, and you're looking at like, okay, we're gonna have to hire 20 people to manage our screenshot function to make sure that someone doesn't put swastikas all over everything, so that someone else doesn't sue us because we accidentally officially endorsed swastikas. It's an investment. So and back to the so there's that part, and then there's back to the original question of like, would games be better? Excuse me. It's a challenge right now for game developers, and game publishers. You have the economy's down, right? And if you look at kind of games, you can parallel it to movies, right? You see a lot of sequels. You see a lot of the same kind of genres coming out. You see kind of a lot of Me Too's. And that's because, the people that are writing the checks, the big investors, they're worried. They can afford to fund a one-off kind of indie, type of project here, there. But they can't take big risks because they don't know where the economy is going to go. They don't know where the next generation of consoles are going to go. They don't know the next big giant leap in used game sales when the next game retailer is going to, sell all our games for $55 and keep all the profit for themselves and not give anything back to the publishers. They don't know where those things are going. So if you look at it from their perspective, is it safer to make them Uncharted style game, or is it safer to make Minecraft? Right? Like it's just like, well, Uncharted's proven, and obviously Minecraft is proven now, so I'm sure there's a bunch of Minecrafts in development. But when it comes to a game where you're coming to a publisher and you're saying like, I mean, if you look at the industry again, like go back to Double Fine's a great example. I talked about Double Fine earlier. Double Fine made some fucking awesome games.
They didn't sell.
But they didn't, yeah, and they sold, they sold reasonably, and I don't know if they were profitable or not, but if you're a publisher and you have a choice between this one team that's saying, like, we're totally going to make the next Call of Duty, and it'll be a Call of Duty killer, or we're totally going to make the next Beyond Good and Evil killer, it's going to be awesome, it's going to be the best girl with a pig ever, you're going to go with the Call of Duty killer over the, Beyond Good and Evil killer, right? And I've seen that over and over and over at publishers. And it's not necessarily the publisher's fault. I mean, a lot of it is the gaming community. I mean, people don't buy Beyond Good and Evils. They don't buy Psychonauts, and I can understand that as a professional developer. I understand. Like, I saw Psychonauts and I was like, that looks cool. I don't really know what kind of game it is. So do I want to go plunk my $60 down? Back in the day, we'd get our shareware and, get our Dooms and our Quakes and our Wolfensteins and, play the first 15 minutes and go, holy shit, this is awesome. But now we're so inundated with media. I mean, look at the top tens of iTunes. They're either Angry Birds or clones of other things, modern, Warfighter Battle Happy Company 2 or whatever. And so it's not just, so I would, even though I'm indie now and I can say whatever I want, I would temper the gaming community to just take this. It's easy to take the route of like, well, it's these big corporations and they're just trying to screw us, and the same people that canceled Firefly and Jericho, and they just want to, screw over gamers and just pump out the same things over and over again. But unfortunately, dollars talk, man. Like if you're an investor and you're writing a check for $30 million, are you gonna take the risk when you can take the safe bet and know that you're gonna get $40 million back, or are you gonna take the bet that maybe you'll give you $5 million back? Yeah, I mean that's the reality of it, and I don't have a solution. I mean, digital distribution is going to help. I hope we in the next generation are on full digital distribution, and hopefully digital distribution would allow. We at one point thought that episodic content was going to be kind of the solution, but that doesn't seem to have taken off. We thought that episodic content would allow game developers to, hey, we're going to make one chapter of this, and then, put it out there, and then if it's awesome, then we'll just keep making more chapters.
I'm still waiting for episode 3.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody is, right? But a lot of the episodic content didn't make it, or the episodic games didn't make it. Now, the problem is, though, I mean, content's only a quarter of the battle. I mean, building the whole game to work, is 60% of the work, and the content's the other 40%. So once you've done all the work to get the first episode, you've basically spent a good chunk of the money that it takes to make the whole dang game anyway. So there's a lot of business model problems, and there's a lot of funding problems. There's a lot of problems in that, the games industry, with the talent versus the funders, we're a lot where the movie industry was a long time ago. We still kind of have the studio model, there's a lot of challenges, but so, part of it is, to kind of summarize that long-winded answer, which I tend to do, is that, yes, there is an element of corporate, I would say, playing it safe, because of the climate, because of the platforms, because of youth game sales, because of piracy, because of all these other issues. But there's also an element of, the community not buying those games, and movies can have those runaway hits because a Memento probably costs a lot less than Transformers to make in the movie theater, right? But Beyond Good and Evil might not cost that much less than Battlefield 3. If you're going to make both games today. So there's kind of a risk versus reward kind of catch-22.
Right. All right. The last fan question is, the new game that you're coming out with, what kind of game types are going to have? Like a retrieval, a total conquest, no respawn, team v team, bomb hostages, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start with obviously the three core gameplay modes: team, co-op, and solo adversarial. So team v team, adversarial, solo, and co-op mission play, and then co-op mission generated play. So your old school, your terrorist hunts. One of the things that I found is that to build the systems to make good missions and to make good core multiplayer and co-op games is you tend to have, when you build those systems robustly, you end up with game modes like terrorist hunt or firefight from Halo. You build those systems, and so those are fun game modes. As far as specific game modes, looking a lot. I'm sure we'll have team deathmatch. Standard kind of kill everybody thing. I would like to avoid respawn game types. Respawn game types in tactical shooters had a lot of problems. I spent a good 5 years of my life trying to solve respawns in Ghost Recon. And then when I finally did, I think, come up with a pretty good solution for spawn camping. And then I got a lot of flack from people that said I ruined the game because spawn camping was an essential tactic. So, tac shooter fans, you'll never make them happy. I think permadeath is kind of a core to that tension level. And if you don't have permadeath, then I think that's I think that's pretty core. Unless play testing proves me wrong, I'd stick to my guns pretty hardcore on that. What that means though is if you're going to have permadeath, you got to have some really cool camera options for people to make cool videos and look at cool things while you're dead. You got to have something to do, especially if you have long matches. Although I tend to lean towards shorter matches for adversarial play. I think people in general, regardless of the game type, they want relatively quick. I know when I was a modder, one of the first things I did, there's that level in Rogue Spear where it was like the power plant, and the thing was like a 15-minute walk from one point to the other, and you could literally miss each other and like wander around for half an hour until the time ran out. And the first thing I did is I chopped that up into like 10 levels. You can still have non-linearity. It doesn't mean it has to be get lost and don't find anybody and then get shot in the head and then get lost and find anybody and then get shot in the head. As far as specific game modes, definitely looking at objective play. One thing I like about Counter-Strike is that aside from kind of the weapons handling and character movement and stuff, I really like the objective-based gameplay, and that it's got those objectives in, and it's very clear what the objectives are, and there's tactics built around those objectives. I always enjoyed the bomb defusal modes in Rainbow Six. I really enjoyed Siege, was my favorite mode in Ghost Recon, where you defended modes. I enjoy the objective-based gameplay in Halo that I played, and so I would lean towards those game modes. Deathmatch is deathmatch. It's like the free game mode. You drop two teams in and let them go. And so if you don't include that, I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people that are grumpy, but you can always use matchmaking and server-based options to allow or disallow those.
All right. Well, thank you for answering all these questions. And is there anything you'd like to say to any fans or anything about your new project or life, whatever?
Yeah, the biggest thing I want to say is, this whole project, this Kickstarter idea and kind of kicking this off, it really is an experiment. I'm not saying that I'm some famous, awesome dude who, you should throw money at.
Well, you're on TINKTINKDOTORG, so you're apparently famous enough, so.
Okay, yeah. I've got one fan, I've got a few fans. I've got a few fans here and there, and hopefully they're not all at my blog, which is just my mother and Chinese spammers. This really is an experiment for me, and it's not just about tac shooters. It's about showing the games industry, the big games industry, that these smaller genres could be successful if they funded them, if they gave the appropriate amount of money to make solid gameplay. It's not about, every flight sim doesn't have to have the cinematic experience of Call of Duty. Every RTS doesn't have to be able to zoom in and, have an Uncharted-like experience. You can have that core gameplay and at that price point and that quality level that people want those games, and they will stand up and support those games. And that's really what I see this as, like a grand experiment. And if it's not successful, I mean, again, maybe it's my marketing skills, or maybe there just really isn't that market. Maybe that's not there. Maybe it is a dead genre. I don't believe that, but it really is up to people to not only hopefully give their money if they can afford it. We can take a minimum $1. If you can't afford $1, then I'm sorry.
Probably can't afford the game to start with.
Yeah. If you can't afford $1, then you need to cancel your internet connection and go, get off the internet. But also just using their social media. I mean, all the clans out there, all the hardcore guys. We've got Twitter, we got Facebook. 5 people still have MySpace. So if people get out there and get the word out, I mean, that's why Double Fine was successful. That's why some of these projects have been successful, is because people really got the word out and spent time. Like, tweeting it once isn't going to do it. This is a project that's got 27 days left on it, and people need to get out and tweet their friends every day and say, hey, there's been an update, and hey, here's a new interview, and hey, have you given yet? Because $15, I mean, to pre-order a game isn't a lot these days. And so we'll see. We're on track, I think, right now, but we'll see what happens.
Good luck with that, and hope everything succeeds and whatnot. This has been Josh Wilson with TinkTinkDOTORG interviews with Mr. Christian Allen, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.
All right.